The fire crackled, sending tiny embers spiraling into the cold night air. For friends Chris, Emily, Mark, and Sarah sat around it, surrounded by nothing but trees, darkness, and the endless quiet of a remote, forgotten forest. They had been hiking all day and were finally settling down at an old campsite they found deep in the woods. The place wasn't on any maps. In fact, it seemed like no one had camped here in decades. But they thought it was perfect, a hidden gem for a weekend adventure. "Do you think anyone's been here before?" Sarah asked, looking around nervously. "Who cares?" Mark shrugged. "It's peaceful. That's all that matters." Emily, the curious one of the group, couldn't help but wander a little further from the fire, her flashlight flickering as she scanned the surroundings. She noticed something odd: an old, rusted sign leaning against a tree. She brushed away the dirt and debris to reveal faded words. "Do not stay after dark." Her stomach nodded as she read it. "Guys, come look at this," she called out, but her voice sounded distant, as if the forest was swallowing it. The others joined her, staring at the eerie sign with confused expressions. "Must be a joke," Chris said, but his voice lacked confidence. They returned to the fire, trying to brush off the unsettling feeling creeping into their bones. The forest seemed different now, though. The tall trees, which had once felt like a protective canopy, now loomed like silent watchers. As the night grew colder, strange noises started to echo from the darkness beyond their campsite. At first, it was just faint rustling in the bushes. Then came the snapping of branches, too heavy to be caused by an animal. Every now and then, they would hear what sounded like whispers carried by the wind, soft, indecipherable, and chilling. Chris grabbed his flashlight. "It's probably nothing. I'll go check it out." "No, stay here," Emily urged. "That sign, it feels like a warning. Something's not right." But Chris was stubborn. He stepped into the darkness, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the trees. The others watched nervously, huddled closer to the fire. Minutes passed, and then they heard it, a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the trees. Chris was gone. "Chris!" Mark shouted into the darkness, his voice trembling with fear. But there was no answer, only the sound of their own panicked breathing. Suddenly, the fire started to flicker, as if it was being smothered by an unseen force. The whispers grew louder, circling them. Sarah clutched Emily's arm, her eyes wide with terror. "We need to leave now," Emily said, her voice barely a whisper. But as they turned to gather their things, they saw it standing at the edge of the firelight, just beyond the trees. A figure. Its outline was human, but distorted, like it was melting into the shadows. Its face, if it even had one, was hidden by the darkness. Mark froze. "What is that?" The figure didn't move. It just stared, its presence filling the air with an overwhelming sense of dread. Then, without warning, it stepped forward, its body gliding unnaturally as it crossed the campsite. Panic surged through them. They bolted for the trail, hearts racing, breaths shallow. As they ran, the whispers followed louder, more frantic, like the forest itself was alive and desperate to keep them there. The path twisted in ways they didn't remember, and no matter how far they ran, it felt like they were going in circles. Finally, they burst through the trees, finding their car parked at the edge of the woods. They scrambled inside, slamming the doors. The whispers stopped. The forest was silent again, but as Mark started the engine and they sped away, Emily looked back one last time. There, standing at the tree line, was the figure, watching, waiting. The forgotten campsite had claimed its victim, and it wasn't done yet. As they drove into the night, Emily glanced at the back seat. Her heart froze. A cold, yellow glow stared back at her from the darkness. The figure had followed them. The next morning, the car was found abandoned by the roadside. No trace of the friends was ever discovered. Only the whispers in the forest remained, warning those who dared to camp there.
Do not stay after dark.